this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. It's Friday, the 14th of June here in Washington, D.C., and here we are again with our weekly strategic briefing. We're fresh back from New York City from the annual Left Forum down at Pace University, and that was a very successful intervention for the United Front Against Austerity, intervening into the New York City primary campaigns, right? Because right now you've got the Democratic primary for mayor, tantamount to election in the Big Apple, or used to be. So that's going on right now. And all of that was focused on Pace University down on Park Row by City Hall. Hope some of you were there. We had a full room. There were some rooms that were completely empty, like the one after ours was nobody. But ours was quite successful. Now, there is a tape of this. Unfortunately, we tried very hard to get live streaming, but since our Ford Foundation grant somehow didn't come through, we couldn't do that. But don't despair. There will be a tape of that, which will go up sometime next week, I would estimate at this point. And that will be on Tarpley.net. So, as always, keep up with Tarpley.net. I find when I go out on the road, if people are not reading the articles, if you're not keeping up in depth with Tarpley.net, you simply don't know what's happening around you. You are essentially adrift on an ocean of adventures. You're lost in a wilderness of mirrors. Now, the imperative this week, as always in our time, to mobilize. There's not information here. It's a method. It's a method of analysis, but it's a method of action. And without the action, the analysis will wither and die. So mobilize. Obama has taken, I would say, a half step towards a catastrophic general war in the Middle East. And don't kid yourself. Don't say, oh, it's only half a step. No, it's a half a step towards a catastrophe. And you're not that far from the abyss. So there are not too many more half steps. Now, here's always the problem of trying to provide political education is to understand the urgency of the situation without, however, lapsing into the hysteria of certain commentators who they feel that they've got to essentially paint the end of the world on the wall. Always, next week, the end of the world. Well, we hope not, and so far not. And, the irrepressible Leibnizian optimism here always comes to the fore. But this is a very serious matter. We will go through the whole thing now, and we'll offer you at the end a possible benign, what can you call it, semi-benign, narcissistic explanation for Obama. And, of course, since it's narcissistic, this has a definite plausibility. But let's look at it. It was already touted during the early days of the week, but then on Thursday, that is to say yesterday, the 13th of the month, the 13th of June, 2013, the Obama White House announces that they are going to provide military support to the Syrian al-Qaeda death squad terrorist rebels. And that's a very, very fateful step. That's an act of incalculable folly. Seemingly sensing this, Obama did not appear. Obama did not issue a statement in his own name. Obama did not make a Rose Garden appearance as he might at this time of year. He didn't give a speech from the Oval Office. None of that. It's just Ben Rhodes. And we know Ben Rhodes, right? Ben Rhodes has got a Nuremberg indictment a mile long because of his participation last year in that sinister, dastardly coup d'etat attempt, which failed, right? The big thing in their world is that it failed. You'll remember it was a bomb that blew up part of the National Defense Council of Syria, killed some top Syrian generals and other leaders, and it was an attempt to decapitate the Syrian state that failed. The Syrian state proved stronger than the machinations of terrorists. And Ben Rhodes' contribution was, of course, drawing on his television expertise, drawing on the experience of Libya when the fake green square of Tripoli, Libya, had been prepared in the gutter. Ben Rhodes, with his dear brother, the other Rhodes, who runs CBS News, has run that into the ground. Ben Rhodes was part of the attempt to create a parallel CIA, NSA media universe, which then was going to take over the Syrian airwaves and broadcast disinformation. But, of course, since this was known in advance, partly through the efforts of my friend Thierry Maison, Maison broadcast, he wrote about it in advance, and the result was that the Syrian national television and the loyal pro-Syrian channels were putting out public service announcements saying, if it looks like this station has changed its political line, be advised, we know that the imperialists are preparing this attempted media coup. So that was last year. And that's Ben Rhodes. So he's already got an appointment in Nuremberg to answer for that, right? And, of course, you remember what the Nuremberg question is, right? The basic charge in Nuremberg is international conspiracy to wage aggressive war. And that, of course, involves now Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Britain and France, and other NATO elements, and the Israelis, and so on down the line, right? And probably others that we would have to add to that list. So Ben Rhodes is the one they sent out, right? Now, this is interesting. In the recent media dealings of the Obama regime, right, we have Bob Schieffer a couple of weeks ago saying, why do you send out these non-entities? Why do you send out these little schmucks when it should be somebody who's a decision maker and somebody of gravitas who can actually articulate a policy, right? They want to see the Secretary of State or Defense or the Vice President or the President or somebody. Instead, they send out a little non-entity like Ben Rhodes. Well, that's an interesting question. You can see that Obama likes to operate behind screens. And as I said last week, the coming of Susan Rice and the coming of Samantha Power is also perhaps an attempt to acquire more screens, more people who can absorb the darts as we go down the cycle. Because I'm still convinced that Obama is a dyed-in-the-wool narcissist. Obama's loyalty to Obama has not been undermined by this. It's alive and well. It's as vehement as it ever was. So we are told in rather vague terms that there will be military support, there will be direct support. Now, the occasion for this is, of course, a monument to hypocrisy. We're told that the occasion is that the review that had been ordered in April or even earlier by the Obama regime concerning chemical weapons has now been completed. And the finding now is the Obama regime is convinced that chemical weapons were used by the Assad government. This is already a big lie. This is not the point. You'll remember that it was the Israelis, the dear Israelis, who were screaming about chemical weapons, joined by the British and the French. But that's not the reason. The reason we'll give you when we return here in just a minute. To World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley back in Washington after a foray to the Left Forum in New York City last weekend, and you can see the various tapes of that in the coming week at tarpley.net, tarpley.net, And in these troubled times with fast-moving news, keep up with Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. And prepare to take action. We need anti-war action, and we need action for Warren Tierney. We're going to have, at the end of the month now, we've got half of June is gone, and at the end of the month, the interest rates on those Stafford loans are going to double, and it's time for action. The younger generation already groaning under this. The big explosion may not come until September, October, but the groundwork has got to be laid now, and the anarchists have got to be countered now. And organization, strategy, leadership, and program have got to be asserted now. So back to Syria. And obviously, if you get a general war in the Middle East, that will essentially guarantee reactionary policies at home, right? That's the story of Woodrow Wilson, the story of Mad Dog Bush Jr., that's the story of Obama in quite a few ways. The hypocritical line from Ben Rhodes, this little nonentity, is that chemical weapons have now been proven to have been used on the part of Assad at the expense of the death squads. Well, that is not the reason. The reason is the catastrophic defeat of the death squads at Qusayr on Wednesday, the 5th of June. That is to say, about 10 days ago, right now, we've had that turning point in the war, the Stalingrad of the death squads, and we'll talk about this in a second. But the main question now is that from the point of view of the CIA, the State Department, the British, the French, the Israelis, Turkey elements, certainly, and, of course, the paymasters in Saudi and Qatar and United Arab Emirates, the entire secret army of death squads now faces annihilation. So that is what brings the pressure on Obama, to which he has now grudgingly yielded this half step. And half step, if you're close enough to the abyss, that may be enough to precipitate you into the abyss. And we don't know that yet. But let's also not start screaming, right? That's not going to help us if we go raving off into the twilight zone here. The question now is, let's look at the internal dynamics of this declaration. We're told that the Syrian government has killed between 150 and 100 and 150 persons. And it's not told how many times the chemical weapons were actually used, but it's more than one. So it's at least two. We're in the plural realm, right? We may be in the dualis, or we may be in the plural, more than one, to be sure. Now, here's the problem with this. If it's sarin nerve gas, heavy-duty, serious nerve gas, right, not old mustard gas or old Zyklon B, but modern, potent, weaponized sarin, how can you have 2+ uses and you only kill 100 to 150 people? What kind of sense does this mean? What was it, diluted? What kind of gas was this? Another interesting question is, when did these applications occur? Obama touts his red line. Well, the red line was last year in the election campaign. Did the Syrian government do it allegedly after or before? But the main issue is, this is absurd. You can't have sarin used twice and more than twice, and the harvest of victims is 100 to 150. Makes no sense. In any case, now let's go on to the next point. We are told that there is now proof that the British have sent proof, that the French have sent proof. Not mentioned these days, but in the background, the Israelis may have sent proof. All right, we want to see the proof. We don't believe you. We believe that the U.S. intelligence community is full of subversives, that it's full of moles, that it's full of liars, incompetents, time servers. You can extend the list. Double agents, crackpots. We want to see the proof. We don't believe you. We didn't believe Mad Dog Bush the Younger. Remember? There were weapons of mass destruction. There were chemical weapons, and they never found a can of Raid. They never found a can of insecticide. We want to know what the definition of chemical weapons is. Now, I've been saying sarin all along, but it's not even clear that it's sarin. What if it's tear gas? What if it's mace? What if it's the kind of thing that a lady might have in her purse, right? Who knows what this is? This is in the land of vagueness. Nobody in his right mind is going to die for this kind of garbage. So, and of course, what the British send and the French send, let's look at them. The French have got so much egg on their face, it's a souffle omelet. The French, remember, last spring, more than a year ago, we had Mohammed Merah. He was there, double agent. They sent him around the Middle East, and then they turned around and accused him of attacking the Jewish school in Toulouse, and then they have to make sure they kill him to make sure that he doesn't get to testify. And as for the British, perfide Albion, their ineptitude and duplicity is also monumental. And these are powers with a vested interest, for God's sake. The British, the French, the Israelis, and others have an axe to grind. They want to fight to the last American. They are ready to fight until the last American has died in the quest to restore Sykes-Picot, Entente Cordiale, Suez 1956 imperialism to the Middle East. So if there's proof, we want to see it. Now, there's the other side. Carla Del Ponte of the United Nations in Geneva prepared, along with her staff, and this is United Nations, this is serious, and quite comprehensive and less politicized than this other garbage. Remember, Carla Del Ponte's finding was, yes, chemical weapons have been used, poison gas used, by the rebels, So in order to take this seriously, coming from Ben Rhodes of the Obama White House, our little friend here, we would have to see also a refutation. In other words, do we have a moral equivalence between both sides using chemical weapons? Was it that the rebels used chemical weapons first as a provocation and then Assad responded? That makes it look different. Or is it just that the rebels used it and that's the entire story? So we need to hear a refutation of Carla Del Ponte. And it's more than just Carla Del Ponte now, because we've got the finding that the rebels, the terrorists, the death squads, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda in Iran, the Emirate, the Islamic State, they were caught red-handed with sarin gas inside Turkey. Not only did the rebels set off bombs inside Turkey as a provocation, but they were caught in flagrante delicto, right, in the act, with this sarin gas in Turkey. So you've got two cases. You've got the Carla Del Ponte finding, and then you've got the Turkish arrest. So this is a pretty lame performance, and I don't know, maybe by design. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. To World Crisis Radio, once again, our edition of Friday, the 14th of June. This pathetic performance by Ben Rhodes leaves all the questions open. Where's the proof that Assad used chemical weapons? We want to see it. Where's the refutation of the Carla Del Ponte allegations that the terrorists used chemical weapons? And where's the refutation of the Turkish police report that the terrorist rebels were found inside Turkey with sarin that they were going to use? And, of course, a lot of people in the world don't believe this lame story coming from little Ben Rhodes. They need a microscope to see him. The Russian Foreign Ministry says it's not true. It's a lie. And even in real time, we had key members of the Russian Duma, the parliament there in Moscow, saying the United States is lying. Ben Rhodes is a little liar. And we have it also from the Syrian Foreign Ministry spokesman, you lie, to Obama. Not the first time that he's heard it, but to Ben Rhodes, right? Because Obama was nowhere to be found. Obama was showing a low profile. So maybe that's an indication that he's not completely invested. Now, let's look at the situation. There is a very good chance that whatever Obama does will be too little too late. It may be that the doom of the terrorist al-Nusra, al-Qaeda death squads is already sealed. That is certainly quite a possibility. I've compared this Battle of Qusayr with the fall of Qusayr, the liberation of Qusayr on Wednesday, June 5th. That is comparable to Stalingrad. You remember Stalingrad, right? The Wehrmacht was in the city, but the Soviet forces were all around it and eventually encircled it. The Wehrmacht never got to the Volga, which, of course, was the jugular vein of oil on barges being brought from Baku and places on the Caspian Sea up to the battlefronts of European Russia. In this case, this was Stalingrad. The rebels had gotten into the city, but then they were encircled and they were pocketed, and a lot of them were wiped out. There are now far fewer death squad enthusiasts than there were. But it's also comparable to Falaise, the Falaise pocket and the Falaise breakout. We're talking August 1944. We had just had the anniversary, the 6th of June 1944 is the Normandy landings, the Normandy invasion. And then there's a phase of stasis, right? There's a phase of the battles in the hedgerows, right? The bocage. And it takes a long time, right? There are weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in which there's almost no movement. Now there's a buildup going on both sides, but there's no war of movement. And then all of a sudden you have the Falaise pocket and the Falaise breakout, and this is where the Patton Third Army begins to roll. And at that point, there's no place for the German forces to create a line of resistance. In other words, they're basically driven back far, far into eastern France. They're driven back almost to the German border in some cases, but they basically lose all of France. As soon as the Falaise breakout occurs, they go back hundreds of miles, and that's what we see here. The Falaise breakout is that once Qusayr has fallen, then the battlefront immediately shifts all the way up to Aleppo. Look on the map. It's a couple of hundred miles. And I think we can also say that Homs is now going to look more and more like a pocket, that the rebel forces in Homs are probably in a desperate situation, although holding on for the moment. And then, of course, you have these countryside areas that just count for much less. So there is a very good chance that none of this equipment is going to reach whatever it is, right? And that we also don't know. Let us record here, Obama, the first civilian airliner, the first passenger airliner of any country that is hit by a Stinger missile, a man-pads, shoulder-fired, surface-to-air. You will be impeached. That's you, Obama. So don't think you're going to get off the hook on that. You sent out Ben Rhodes, but the buck will not stop with Ben Rhodes. So I would say don't do it. The rebels are screaming they want anti-tank missiles, right? They want Milan, they want HOT, they want, there are others, Russian ones too, I'm sure they'd like to have. But don't give them to them, because then they're going to use them on God knows who, right? On the Turks, on the Israelis. And whatever we think of this, that's going to be a big problem for anybody who does this. Now, the rebels. Who are you supporting here, Obama? The rebels are documented as carrying on the following atrocities. A lot of them are ripe for Nuremberg dock themselves. Cannibalism. I suppose the argument might stop there. But cannibalism, public cannibalism, filmed on YouTube. You can see it. A step back. It's just a step back to the Stone Age, essentially. Chemical weapons, right? We've had it, that the death squads deploy chemical weapons in Syria, says Carla Del Ponte, and in Turkey, say the arresting officers. Everybody by now has seen mass executions of prisoners of war, the machine gunning of prisoners of the Syrian army, right? I've seen one of 3, one of 11 or 12, and on, and this has gone on for a long time, right? Piles and piles of corpses, and that's the rebels doing that. Then we got kidnappings, right? At least 2 kidnappings at a distance of several months of the Filipino troops who were holding the United Nations peacekeeping positions on the Golan Heights. The Austrians have said that they've had it. They're not going to stay around for that. We followed the kidnapping of Anhar Kochnieva, the distinguished Ukrainian-Russian journalist who was held, for ransom because it shades over into criminality. We're also told that the rebels are great drug pushers, right? A lot of cocaine, a lot of other illegal narcotics go in there. The rebels have also been guilty of using corpses as props, right, along the Gleiwitz radio station model, right, the one that Hitler used to try to justify his attack on Poland. They arrange the corpses and put different clothes on them and so forth, and then try to convince people that their people have been killed. And they fight among themselves, these rebels. This is chaos. This is the bellum omnium contra omnes, the war of all against all. The Idris forces have been in a pitched battle with the Nusra forces. These are two gangs of thieves, two fascist gangs fighting it out, slight differences, just in the last couple of days. And some of these pro-regime commentators here were saying, oh, we're so happy that Idris has been able to hold his own against Nusra for the first time in a long time. Well, you forget it. That Nusra and the Islamic Emirate of Iraq, they're the ones who are going to take over. So what you're looking at is it's an absolute monstrosity. There are no democratic forces. And remember also in the areas controlled by the rebels, you got Sharia law. You've got benighted, backward administration, right? Syria is a relatively modern state. Nasserist influence is very strong. Modern law code. Status of women much better. No discrimination. No harassment of women in the streets. But now in the rebel areas, we haven't heard too much about it, but, lopping off limbs, lopping off heads, women stoned. Maybe they've kept that under wraps too, but that's the direction. And ultimately, what is it? If you go down this road, right, you're now on the slippery slope, you're now on the Vietnam syndrome, you've sent in advisors, they've been there, you're going to send in some weapons now, then you're going to have to send in more, and then it gets to be no-fly zone. The no-fly zone is a 2 to 3 week air campaign, bombing everything in sight. How many losses? Will the aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean be invulnerable against the very powerful Yakont missiles? Will other warships be invulnerable? U.S. has not lost an aircraft carrier since 1944-45. Are they invulnerable? Probably not. It means war with Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and possibly Pakistan. No way. Turn back now and get out there and mobilize. Back in a minute. Back to World Crisis Radio. So Obama, very foolish. On the other hand, you can see that he thinks he's cagey. He's got paths of plausible deniability, and he's got emergency exits built in. Before he takes the last exit to Brooklyn, that is the abyss, the war, he's got various possibilities. A war with Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and who knows, maybe even Pakistan, if it goes that far, if they insist on these drones. You'll remember that's what Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about in the spring of 2007, right, when he said that there was a false flag operation planned against Iran, a terrorist incident that would be manufactured and blamed on Iran. And then the United States would find itself at war alone and without allies against all those countries. Now, there might be some allies now. One of the things that's going on is Obama is trying to con Cameron and Hollande. You go first. This is the famous Alphonse Gaston routine, right? Après vous, Alphonse. Nous, après vous, Gaston. So they can't see who's going to go through the door first. Obama says, you go first, right? The famous European novel, Over the Cliff by Hugo First. So Obama says, here, Cameron and Hollande, you go first. And they say, oh, no, Alphonse, you go first. There is this built in, right? Everybody has a doctrine of leading from behind and buck passing and let the others shoulder the main sacrifices. That is one of the things that Obama's fighting for. He's fighting for the idea of buck passing, which is his fundamental signature approach, right? That's what it means to be leading from behind. But now, having mentioned Zbigniew Brzezinski, this morning on MSNBC on Morning Joe, right, where all the facile, glib imperialists, right, the clever liberal imperialists tend to gather there in the morning. Brzezinski himself went through a critique. He says the Obama policy is chaotic, fragmented, it's baffling, it's made up of half measures. What is the goal of this? Is it to punish Assad, or is it to stop him? Is it to save the death squads? What is it? But I think his fundamental advice is not the worst. Brzezinski says this is a religious sectarian war. Now, I wouldn't put it that way, but that's his view. You'll hear mine, and you are hearing mine. He says it's a religious sectarian war, Sunnis and Shiites, and it is absolutely futile to try to intervene in that. It's a civil war, and I think what you may find as outrageous as I do, right, irritating, annoying, these sanctimonious hypocrites who get up there and say 93,000 have been killed. Yeah, they weren't all killed by Assad. The death squads have been busily killing people, and they've even put it on film. So if you don't believe that the death squads have been killing up a storm, you can go on YouTube and see all the handiwork of the death squads, and as their name suggests, right, that's the Salvadoran solution, the Negroponte Ford solution brought into Iraq in 2005, 2006, and then immediately Syria was part of it because that was considered part of the fighting front. So Brzezinski points out, he says, remember, both sides kill. Yeah, it's a war, so both sides kill. I would simply add, it's incommensurable between a modern secular state, a UN member state, on the one hand, recognized by the United States even today, and on the other hand, a gaggle of death squad killers who are the antithesis of civilization in every sense. There is no comparison. However, as he says, both sides are killing. Stop making it sound like Assad is the only one killing. You can argue that what he does is self-defense. These other people are largely foreigners, and they are the aggressors. And I would add, it started at the very beginning. There was not 1 hour of this, not 1 minute of it at the beginning in the spring of 2011 without killing by the death squads. The death squads were there from the first minute. There was no halcyon phase of wonderful pro-democracy activists. They were guns and shooting and killing from the very beginning, and that's true. I investigated this in Homs and in Banyas, and this is a finding that is unimpeachable. Now, Brzezinski then says, if you really wanted to do something about this, you would have to avoid this wider war. In other words, if you attack Syria and Hezbollah, you're going to be at war with Iran sooner or later, and that is then going to bring you some blowback from people who don't like that, right? That's going to disrupt the tanker traffic of the Gulf. That's going to get China going. That's going to get Japan going. That's going to get India going. So here is Brzezinski said, look, if you want to impose a solution, then you would have to have an accord with Russia, with China, with Japan, considered influential by Brzezinski, probably right, and India. Now, what he's really saying is you can't do it because you can't get that entire thing. Now, I've gone through what I think to be the moral as well as the strategic of this thing. There is no interlocutor there. There's nobody you can talk to. Assad and Moalem say they're happy to go to the Geneva conference if it ever occurs, and the death squad say no, we want Hezbollah out, we want Assad out. In other words, they have all manner of absolutely fantastic and unrealistic preconditions. Now, other sources of good advice. David Bromwich, writing in the New York Review of Books, keep out of Syria, stay out of Syria. Good reading for Obama. Again, not my analysis, but practically don't do it. Oh, but then on the other side, the warmongers. Let's go through some of them. The two amigos, McCain and Graham, they're for war, of course. How about Kelly Ayotte, the three amigos? Bill Clinton, compounding his profound moral turpitude, has been saying over the past several days, Syria is not Iraq, Syria is not Afghanistan, get ready to attack. No, no, and no. And that of course, is also duplicity, because he obviously sees some way in which that's going to help catapult the bankrupt mediocrity Hillary Clinton into the White House. Amanpour, absolutely on the pro-war line. This Tory Clark, right, Victoria Fragos Clark, she's on the war line. Nick Burns, State Department veteran with his own Nuremberg story. Dexter Filkins of the New Yorker magazine, a particularly inane version of this. Okay, so the issue is joined. There is a demonstration in Britain. I'll get you the details on that as we go along. The demonstration is on Saturday, so that means, unfortunately, by the time you hear this, according to British time, it's probably done. But let me just mention this because it shows you what you should be doing. It's Stop Western Intervention in Syria, U.S. Embassy, Grosvenor Square, London, W1A 2LQ, Saturday, 15th of June, 1 p.m. in Britain. So if you hear this, if you have a way to get to it, go to it. And, of course, we need to organize the same thing here. Anybody who knows anything about anti-war demonstrations, hands off Syria, keep out of Syria, please send me that. Go to tarpley.net. Go to the Speakers Bureau page. There is a contact feature there. There's a box. You type it into the box. It goes to me. I will try to answer if there's anything that I need to answer, and you get the idea. There's also the question of the coup. The coup. In 1999, in the springtime, Clinton apparently has forgotten what happened. But, of course, Clinton was shell-shocked at that point. He had just escaped removal, right? He had been impeached, and he was almost removed, but he had to mortgage his entire presidency to stay in power. And one of the things was a deal with Al Gore. You'll remember Primakov of Russia was flying over the Atlantic. Al Gore gave the order to start bombing Serbia in the spring of 1999. Clinton never did. We may be close to that now. Some military clique camarilla may decide, start the bombing, and we'll tell Obama later. Watch out for that. Back in a minute. Back to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. It's Friday, June 14th, 2013. Webster Tarpley speaking from the nation's capital. Obviously, a step towards the abyss, a half step towards the abyss by Obama. If he delivers on any of this, it will become a full step towards the abyss. Let's also just give an overview of this Obama question. Why is Obama now suddenly so much weaker than he was? As I mentioned, if we go back to 1999 with Clinton, there's every indication that the order to bomb Serbia was given by Gore, Al Gore, right, vice president at the time of maximum weakness of Clinton. Russian President Yevgeny Primakov was flying across the Atlantic. to seal a peace deal, and it was ultimately a Russian mediation that did deliver peace about 3 months later, after 3 months of vandalistic bombing. So that peace deal could have been had at the beginning of the bombing in the early spring. But instead, even while Primakov was over the Atlantic, Gore gave the order to start bombing. Primakov turned around. The humiliation, the affront, the arrogant insult was a diplomatic incident in its own right. There's also, I think, some research to be done about Libya and the bombing of Libya and exactly the mechanics of that. How was this done? Because you'll remember the bombing began on, I believe, Saturday, March 19th, 2011. I remember I was down here at the White House in a peace demonstration with the great Chris Hedges, who talked about war but didn't mention the fact that a new war had started that day. That wasn't relevant. He was concerned about Iraq, and that was it. But some interesting dynamics, I think, went on, whatever they were. So now we have Obama. Now, what's his problem? Many, but the principal one is we had the inauguration, we had the State of the Union address. There is no jobs program. The United States would need 30 million plus new productive jobs at union wages and with decent to high capital investment in each job. And if you wanted to survive politically, I suppose you could get by with 5 to 10 million new productive jobs or jobs. Obama doesn't even have that. In other words, the minimum necessary to survive politically is perhaps somewhat less than the optimum figure from the economic point of view. But you would need to have absolute rock bottom, 5 million jobs to give the idea of a positive direction. Obama doesn't have that. He's sitting there with his complacency, contemplating his own narcissistic greatness. And then the other one is he touched the third rail. He's talking about the chained consumer price index. That's the third rail. Surprise, surprise. You touched the third rail. You're in big trouble. And now he is. And, of course, the $400 billion in additional Medicare cuts for a total of $1.1 trillion Medicare cuts. That's another third rail in its own right. So that's Obama's story. Now, why does he do it now? Well, it's all about Obama, as usual, right? The narcissist. He's got the G7, G8 next week in Northern Ireland, right? Ulster, right? You'd think he'd object to going there. It's like a place under colonial occupation, right? It's not really pacified. So anyway, G7, G8. He's going to be there, right? The G7 is the traditional Rambouillet series starting in 1975, goes back to Schmidt and Giscard, but plus Putin, right? Putin's going to be there. So obviously Obama more afraid of Hollande and Cameron and some others than of reality. So he wants to be able to fend off criticism. So he's done sort of the minimum, the absolute bare minimum to get himself through it without giving up his tremendous image. So he's looking for a smoke screen to get through that, a kind of a space-saving device. And, of course, people will get killed to the extent that any of this arrives. Again, the main hope is that by the time these things arrive, the death squads will have been, shall we say, dispersed. And because that, in some cases, if you have secessionists, that's all you can do. As General Sherman pointed out, right? If they really insist, well, then you have to deal with them. You can't let civilization go down because somebody thinks that slavery, or in this case their own belief system, is the key to everything. All right, so this is the situation in that regard. Concerning Iran, we have the very interesting quote from Ayatollah Khamenei. Go to hell. If you don't like our elections, go to hell. Well, we may not approve of all the details, but we admire that spirit. That's certainly the necessity is under the UN Charter, meddling and interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states is strictly prohibited. Force and the threat of force are prohibited. So butt out of the internal affairs of Iran and other countries. It is none of your business. You have no soapbox of moral, intellectual, or practical superiority, right? Forget it. We don't need lectures about it. Let their process play out. Guided democracy. It's probably better to do it this way than in other ways that it could be done. And unfortunately, a lot of the opposition to this are the golden youth and the desperate housewives of Tehran North, right? They're people who want Mercedes-Benz, not bread subsidies for the poor. Remember, Ahmadinejad's base, very much the poorer working people, and his heritage is 20 million new housing units planned or in progress right now to provide housing for Iran into the future. Concerning the destabilization of Turkey, Erdogan has now just about worn out his welcome. I don't see how Erdogan thinks he's going to pull himself out of this. Of course, the Turkish state is a relatively strong one. Remember, though, the people who are trying to tell you that this is like the People's Park in Berkeley. Remember the People's Park in Berkeley, 1969? When you go from the big issues of the Vietnam War down to the absolutely cretinous, local, idiotic issues, trivial issues. Oh, our park. All right. That's not the point. The way that this mass movement against Erdogan started was in southern Turkey. People who had seen those death squad characters up close, the Syrian terrorist fighters, were all smuggled in and bootlegged in through southern Turkey, Iskenderun and Incirlik, and further south, Adana, I think, is a place nearby there. So those were all places where the tourist trade and every other form of activity was ruined by these death squad characters who set bombs. Remember, they set off bombs on Turkish territory as a provocation. We got to add that to the list for the death squad. So that's where it started. That's what the State Department idiots are going to say, oh, it's a wonderful ecological movement to defend the park. This is not the point. However, in the process, we learn an interesting thing. Turkey has a national health care system. How about that? Turkey has got something like medical care for everybody. How about that? What we don't have in the United States, Turkey under Erdogan has. And, of course, Erdogan much resented by the army, right? He's the anti-Ataturk, and he's already thrown 100 or so generals in jail. We are still waiting for Pope Francis's encyclical attacking finance capital, attacking the International Monetary Fund, attacking the concept of austerity. That's going to be a turning point. You can see that he's attempting to counter the corruption inside the Roman Catholic Church, to reform the IOR, the Vatican Bank. So we're looking at all of this with a very positive and benevolent interest. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. World Crisis Radio. Keep up with everything at Tarpley.net. Look at Tarpley.net in a couple of days. You can probably get that speech that I gave in New York City, along with the interventions of J.C. Calhoun and Tom Kiley of INN World Report. And a lot of Q&A. We'll talk about the Q&A if we get some time here. Concerning now the scandal, oh my gosh, the London Guardian, right? Another scandal made in England, Perfide Albion, MI6. The left wing of MI6 speaking through the London Guardian, and the disgruntled left liberal, Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald, an enemy of 9/11 truth, when confronted with a chance to fight the biggest covert operation of the age, Glenn Greenwald struck out. He's a fearless watchdog against the excesses of the Obama regime, but unfortunately, when it came to fighting 9/11, the messy and difficult fight that would have got him, of course, classed as a conspiracy theorist. Oh, no, that was too much for little Glenn. And that's in The Guardian. And then Ed Snowden. Let's just look at a couple of things. This is a limited hangout. And I would say Snowden, the most likely hypothesis for Snowden, is that he's a triple agent, or treble agent, as the British might say. You'll remember Harold Adrian Russell, Kim Philby, one of the most famous triple agents of all recent history. Think about that career, and you'll get an idea of this. Snowden as a triple agent. Well, what are the three layers, right? The most official, you might say, is that officially he's working for the CIA and the NSA, right? He's part of their snooping operation, operating from Hawaii, right? That's his basic identity. He's out in Hawaii snooping for them. But then the second layer of identity is that he's a whistleblower. Some people say he's a traitor, that he's already got a deal with China or Russia or somebody to reveal all of these secrets, and he's probably got more secrets than he has put out. So that's number two. But then at bottom, where is his bread really buttered? CIA. At the bottom, he's a CIA agent all along, and his job is two things: to weaken Obama and set up Obama for this step towards the abyss that we've just seen, to weaken Obama to the point where Obama is going to have to save himself and call off the Anglo-American intelligence dogs. He's going to have to attack Syria. That's the goal. And guaranteed, Snowden comes built in with capabilities against China. Think about Philby, right? Philby defected to the Soviets. He said, I want to work for you. They put him in there. He became a KGB major general. You'd think that people would be more suspicious, but no, they did it. So with Philby, right, at the bottom level, he was working for MI6. But then the second level, he's a defector. He goes over to Moscow and works for the KGB. And then the bottom level is, he's working for the Queen. He's working for British intelligence. Okay? So that's Snowden, triple agent. I saw a listserv where Snowden is described as Christ-like. Yeah. He's a trinity all his own. He's a triple agent. He's got three levels. Now, how do you tell a limited hangout? Well, one obvious way is the media love it. If it's all over CNN, CBS, NBC, and so forth, and the guy's a hero, you're dealing with a limited hangout. If you've ever fought the establishment on any issue, that's not the way they respond. The limited hangouts, Ellsberg, Assange, and now Snowden. I think probably Assange is getting restless that he's not getting as much attention as he used to. A new powerful competitor has emerged on the block. So one way to tell a limited hangout, the establishment media, CNN and so forth, they love it. The second is that there's nothing new. There's nothing you didn't already know. Oh, Verizon wiretaps. Oh, Prism. Yeah, Verizon. These are the warrantless wiretaps of Bush, now with warrants, but on a larger scale. Okay, and Prism is basically stuff that started with Bush, and there's nothing new. Right? It's a confirmation that it's going on. If you go back to the Pentagon Papers, there was nothing new in the Pentagon Papers. If you had been reading Le Monde of Paris and Agence France Presse diplomatic wires, you knew everything in there. There was nothing. And, of course, the Pentagon Papers were doctored to spare the CIA, to cover up CIA atrocities, Operation Phoenix, and drug running. That was covered up. And to demonize the U.S. Army, pin it all on them, and nothing about the main covert operation of the age, the Kennedy assassination. So that's really the one. If there's no information whatsoever on the main covert operation or operations of the age, right? That is to say the JFK assassination in the case of the pompous and self-righteous Ellsberg. And now with Assange, Assange is a declared enemy of 9/11 truth. He thinks this is a diversion. It's not important. And then Glenn Greenwald, another enemy of 9/11 truth. And you will see as time goes on, this guy Snowden will get fishier and fishier. And I saw some poor woman, she said, oh, this is something that gives me hope. Well, you should have learned something now with that hope garbage from Obama, right? Didn't you live through Obama? Isn't it enough to be burned once? Left liberals in particular want to be duped. They have a psychological need to be duped, and they sometimes even know that they're being duped. So that's this NSA stuff. Now, we want to pay a lot of attention to economics here as usual. Now, let's look at what has just happened. The economic and austerity situations. We're continuing on the Warren-Tierney front, right? The Bank on Students bill that will reduce student loan interest to 0.75% and do this by forcing the Federal Reserve and the person of Bernanke to pay, to come up with that money at those interest rates. It is not federal borrowing. It is not taxation. It will not add to the deficit. Nobody will be taxed, and they will not sell any more Treasury bills because it's coming from the in-house bank. You're asserting public control over part of the Federal Reserve. We're told that the likely successor to Yellen, according to a poll of economists, the successor to Bernanke, is one Janet Yellen, says Reuters. Well, this charming lady better get ready to cough up the money because it's either going to be Helicopter Ben coughing up about $4 trillion, or she's going to have to do it. So we are interested in fighting austerity. The Warren-Tierney measure shows the way. That's going to become a big issue as we go towards the end of June, and it's going to explode again on July 1st when the interest rate doubles. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Our congratulations to the Russian Federation this week. June 12th is Russia Day, the national holiday of Russia. We're hoping that the deliveries to the meritorious partners in the Middle East go off without a hitch. And we also we're hoping to commemorate in some way the great anniversary. Not only do we have Gettysburg and Vicksburg, right? Gettysburg, the 150th anniversary of that great victory for humanity and for civilization against slavery and benighted neo-feudal approaches. That's the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of July here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a little bit up the road. And then on July 4th, the capitulation of Vicksburg after General Grant's greatest campaign, and you can see it's a kind of a spiral in on Vicksburg. It's reminiscent of some of the best campaigns of Frederick the Great of Prussia and other great military commanders. So we've got those two anniversaries: Gettysburg 1, 2, 3 July, Vicksburg 4th of July. But then in September, October, we've got two anniversaries. We'll talk about more. These are written up on Tarpley.net. Go take a look. The arrival of the Russian fleets in New York and San Francisco. The Russian Baltic Fleet and I believe the Northern Fleet from Murmansk and places like this coming into New York, and the Russian Pacific Fleet from Vladivostok coming to San Francisco. This was the most important foreign support for Lincoln and the Union. This creates an eternal bond of gratitude between the United States and Russia. Right? Alexander II, who freed the serfs, Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation. And one interesting thing was in San Francisco, at a certain point, the Russian fleet is there on its visit, and they're staying around for several weeks. And reports come that the Confederate raider Shenandoah is going to attack San Francisco. And since there were no appropriate U.S. naval units in the area, the Russian fleet made ready to defend San Francisco against that Confederate attack. Now, that is a great moment of world history, and I think sums up the emotional bedrock of how you ought to look at the modern world. So we'll talk about this more and more. But anyway, congratulations to the Russian Federation. Now, concerning economics, while all this other stuff is going on, right, all the NSA and Verizon and PRISM, the haggling is going on in the background. The Obama charm offensive, believe it or not, continues. The dinners are going on. It's called now the Diners Club. The Republican reactionary austerity ghoul senators, Obama in his weakness and folly and suicide, because it's political suicide for him. He seems to, it's not enough to touch the third rail. He's got to embrace the third rail, right, and smooch it. And that they don't even think it's enough, right? So he's talking to a number of these reactionaries, the people involved in these talks, right? The talks are going on. Senator Ronald H. Johnson of Wisconsin, John Birch Society, I would guess, he says that the Obama proposal on the chained consumer price index is not enough. It's not enough because it would barely solve 20% of the program's long-term cash shortfall. The basic theory of this is an article by Laurie Montgomery, Washington Post, Thursday, June 13th. And we're told that these talks are going on, and the debate is about this, right? It's all on the basis of austerity, right? This is one of Obama's failures, defeats, folly. Don't get yourself onto the terrain of austerity. Get yourself onto the terrain of jobs and recovery. But the weakness of Obama, we know. So should we be talking about the $6.3 trillion of new debt projected over the next decade? No. Or should we be talking about $70 trillion that the Republicans are using as a boogeyman that you're going to have to deal with over the next 30 years? Now, it's favorite reactionary trick, right? They say, we have $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities. Yeah, over the next 100 years, over the next 30 years, 40 years. And the Republican position is, we kill people now. People die. We have killer austerity, genocidal budget cuts because of a theoretical budget crisis of 20, 30 years in the future that none of these people will ever see. It is absolute crackpot demagogy. It's a new variation on fascism. So the Republicans are insisting that we've got to deal with the crisis of 2045, and we've got to do that now. So this is absolutely ridiculous. Now, the team that's negotiating includes this Senator Ronald H. Johnson, but we've also got White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, Deputy Chief of Staff Rob Neighbors, is that old sitcom actor, and the Budget Director Sylvia Matthews Burwell, and they've been talking, and then Obama has been dining and schmoozing with these characters, right? Senator Saxby Chambliss, the scoundrel. Remember him? You know the story. What he did to his predecessor, right? Max Cleland, 3 limbs on the battlefield, and the scoundrel Saxby Chambliss said, "You're not patriotic enough because you don't support the draft dodger Mad Dog Bush." I call him Saxby Shambles. Saxby Shambles, Corker of Tennessee, and Portman. What they're trying to do is winnow down the Diners Club to 4 or 5 reactionary senators for more talks, right, as they plan how to sell you out, how to flay you alive, ultimately how to deprive you of your life, your health, your well-being, in the name of this insane austerity. Now, remember, we're looking at a timetable. October 1st is the new fiscal year. So everything that's been done up to now, right, what we had with the fiscal cliff and the sequester back in early January, end of December, early January, that regarded fiscal year 13. This is it. We're in it. On October 1st, FY14 begins. And if they don't have a deal, there'll be a government shutdown. And will those lunatic proto-fascist, neo-fascist crackpots of the Tea Party with Koch money bulging in their pockets, will they then shut down the government? Or, even worse, the Treasury Department will face a potential default before the year is out. And you know the high ground here. There is something called the 14th Amendment. These reactionaries always yelling about the Constitution. We'll try reading it. The federal debt of the United States shall not be questioned. So the responsibility of the president is pay the debt, meet the obligations of the United States, and if these Congress people try to sabotage it, then they are going to be damned, because the Constitution invests the chief magistrate, the president, with the responsibility of seeing to it that the laws be faithfully enforced. The relevant law is that the public debt of the United States contracted according to law shall not be questioned, and we don't let Confederates come in and interfere with that, which is exactly, of course, what you have here. So we have the answer, right? The Wall Street sales tax. A couple of words about that now in our final segment on World Crisis Radio. Back in a minute. Radio. We got to wrap up some important topics here at the end. The question of austerity, there's a general idea now that for primarily reasons of political management, the austerity ghouls have decided to, in some cases, go a little bit slower. Now, this may create the opportunity for that flare-up of mass strike upsurge that I'm hoping for 2014, 2015 on the model of 1935, 1936. This was the subject of my speech there, one of the subjects in the Left Forum. Last Friday, we got the report of the Medicare Social Security trustees. The Medicare Trust Fund will last us until 2026, 13 years, quite a long time under today's conditions. And the Social Security Trust Fund will last us to 2033 minimum. Now, therefore, it means that all the hysteria, right, all the transparent right-wing demagogy is really mal à propos, right, with Medicare until 2026 and Social Security. And that's with the status quo. To change the status quo, remove the cap on the Social Security tax and the Medicare tax, impose those taxes, unlimited income. Any income you have, wage income, is going to be taxed. And if you're getting carried interest, make that into wage income too, because it's not capital gains, it's your salary. Therefore, that has to get hit with those taxes for those fat cats who've got to pay. The other one, of course, the Wall Street sales tax. The Wall Street sales tax, 1% on all transactions, stocks, bonds, derivatives, above all. This essentially takes us well beyond the imaginable historical horizon. In other words, it gets us into a future so remote that our current calculations mean nothing. Now, we're going to get back to that in just a second. I want to focus also, though, on the Export-Import Bank. Here is a key aspect of the current U.S. economic situation, and I am amazed and horrified to find that the Republican austerity ghouls, right, the people who used to be the party of business, are attacking the Export-Import Bank. This is one of the only things propping up the U.S. dollar, right? In order to have a stable dollar, you've got to have demand for dollars in foreign countries. In other words, people have got to want dollars so that they can buy things that are only available in the United States. Well, what might those be? Biotech and pharma are one. Infotech, computer technology, other things are others. Airplanes are another one, and farm products. And in the middle of this, we have the Export-Import Bank. It is one of the jewels of the New Deal, and it's got to be maintained against this assault by the reactionary Republicans. These are truly vandals. The Export-Import Bank makes money. It goes back to February 1934, and it provides financing for U.S. exports and credit guarantees. Other countries have it. Right? Germany has the famous Hermes credit guarantees. In other words, you get, if you sell, some tanks to Saudi Arabia, as often happens, then the Hermes will finance that and also guarantee it, so the German bank won't lose its money with the vicissitudes of foreign dealing with foreign partners. In France, it's called COFAS, C-O-F-A-S, les crédits cofaciers. That is to say, cheap credit, subsidized credit with credit insurance guarantees built in. We need this here in the United States, and now we've got the refunding of the Export-Import Bank coming up, and God knows, you wouldn't think it, but along comes the reactionary coalition. The Tea Party, Koch, I suppose, doesn't like it. Mullen Scaife probably doesn't like it. It violates the Austrian school. Yes, indeed. The Export-Import Bank. The Daily Caller is attacking the Export-Import Bank. Red states attacking the Export-Import Bank. Again, it's a profit-making entity. It pays back in to the U.S. Treasury, and it's got to be funded. And if you don't have exports, then, of course, your currency will collapse. And this is not desirable. You might want to devalue or something like this. That's fine. But to collapse it and to have no exports, that is absolutely crazy. So we're looking forward to the fight to refund and defend the Export-Import Bank, a key piece of dirigism left over from the New Deal. It was key in World War II, post-war reconstruction, Marshall Plan, and so forth. Right? So it has a glorious past and a big future. This is one of the entities. Now, of course, our approach to this would be to fund it with Federal Reserve money, nationalize the Fed, open up that credit stimulus window, and put $500 billion to $1 trillion into the Export-Import Bank, so we would be able to compete with those Hermes and COFAS, the MITI, right, Ministry of International Trade and Industry of Japan, and, of course, China. These policies for them are simply second nature. So you got to match that. Otherwise, you got to add that extra expense of learning Chinese so you can take orders. Now, having mentioned the Wall Street sales tax, we got great days for the Wall Street sales tax on both sides of the Hudson River. As you heard last week on this program, we've got William Araujo running for governor of New Jersey as an independent candidate for governor of New Jersey, Araujo, A-R-A-U-J-O, William. And now we've also got in New York City, in the contest for mayor, the Democratic primary for mayor, we've got Randy Credico, C-R-E-D-I-C-O, and he's in a field of at least half a dozen Democratic candidates, but the keystone of his entire approach is pay for all the reforms you need with a 0.5% sales tax on Wall Street. The city once had a sales tax on stocks. Actually, the state of New York had it. You pay sales tax on what you buy as a normal person. Why shouldn't bankers, stock speculators, hedge fund managers, derivatives mongers pay for what they buy and sell? New York State, I believe, presently taxes all gambling at up to 68%. Why exempt Wall Street gambling? So we're talking merely 0.5%. And Credico estimates that the Wall Street sales tax at 0.5% would provide $60 billion. That would double the total revenue of New York City to pay for all the necessary reforms. Now, this alone puts Credico head and shoulders above the other candidates, Quinn, the Tammany Machine candidate, Liu, Thompson, de Blasio. Credico is the man, and the other things that he wants to do, a job creation program in New York City in the style of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Good. Expand rent control and freeze all evictions and foreclosures. Good. Demand jail time for the crooked bankers at Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, HSBC, who launder drug money, fund terrorism, and steal billions from the New York and U.S. economies. Good. End sweetheart tax giveaways to giant corporations, especially Wall Street banks. $1.6 billion went to Goldman Sachs. Use that for housing, among other things. Protect small business from predatory rate hikes. Prevent the closing of local hospitals. St. Vincent's and Saanich Village is under attack. Watch out for North General in Harlem and other neighborhood firehouses, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and Staten Island. Raise the minimum wage. Health insurance at the city level. Free college education at CCNY, as we used to have it. Bus and subway fares free for residents. Stop the privatization of public schools. Pay for all that with a 1% sales tax. I urge you to look at Credico for mayor. He's on the internet. Randy Credico. He's endorsed by Cornel West, by a number of other important figures. Francis X. Klein of the old New York Times. www.credico2013. So we'll see you next week here on World Crisis with P.O.